Hi friends, it's Deanna Willison with our Blooming Catholic Life, and in our deep dives into the Third Order of St. Francis, yes, we found another group called the Third Order of St. Francis. You had to know that there were more out there, and certainly there are. We're always finding more every day. This group, I'm going to link this document below, but we're going to go ahead and go through it. This is actually with the SSPX. I'm not going to keep you in suspense. I'm aware of this group. I believe they may be responsible in some way for that book we found on the Office of the Paters. It seems to be a very traditional book, so I can't prove it's them. It does come from an area of the country in which they have a big presence, but can I prove it? No. And does it matter? No, because it's a historical book, and when they fall out of copyright, anybody can pick up the copyright. So, all good. Let's talk about this. It's interesting. It says the following information, even where not directly quoted, was taken primarily from chapters 2 to 5 of the Handbook of the Third Order Secular of St. Francis of Assisi, which is currently out of print, but it was written by Basil Gummerman, OFM Cap, in Paterson, New Jersey, St. Anthony's Guild, 1947. Again, I think that's St. Anthony's Guild. We've run into some of them. If it wasn't the Office of the Paters, we've seen them somewhere else as well. Is the Third Order of St. Francis? So this is both a was and is. It's both historical under the Leonine rule, I believe, as well as contemporary if you're in the SSPX. So whatever Third Order you're in, it's either an interesting historical moment or an opportunity. So what is the Third Order Secular of St. Francis? It is an ecclesiastical association of the laity originally founded by St. Francis of Assisi. It is a state of perfection for persons living in the world. The religious strive after perfection by observing the 3 vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and live in community according to their rule, whereas the members of the Third Order Secular live in the spirit of the vows in fraternal unity according to their own separate rule. Pope Leo the 13th, not the 14th, the 13th, explained that while all Franciscan orders are ordered to the perfection of their members, unlike the first 2 Franciscan orders, open to the few, the Third Order is accommodated to the many. And that's from the Constitution Misericors Filius. Even so, the Third Order is not indiscriminately open to all, and there are times of probation, like the postulancy and the novitiate, before one may be professed for life in the order. What is the purpose of the Third Order? The purpose of the secular Third Orders in the Church is the same as that of religious orders and congregations. They promote Christian perfection. And St. Francis had no other end in view when he established his Third Order. It is easily understood, then, that the first essential duty of the Franciscan tertiaries, that is, Third Order members, they're called tertiaries, is the striving after perfection by faithfully observing the rule. And that's from chapter 3 of the Third Order Handbook. You'll note that I'm not 100% sure that most secular Franciscans these days would say that that's their purpose. So it's kind of interesting. A lot of people try and say it has to do with a lot of social justice, JPEG work, justice, peace, and integrity of creation. But this is saying it's to help you in your journey to God, to become perfect as our Heavenly Father is perfect, to become that perfect golden mirror. If you've not heard me talk about it, you need to read the Legends of St. Clare and the visions that her sisters revealed after her death that are in the testimonies for her cause for sainthood. They talk about a vision she had of St. Francis and how he gave her that golden mirror that perfectly reflected Christ. And it doesn't look like the San Damiano cross or whatever artistic representation you've seen. It was literally a golden mirror. It was St. Francis's own body that bore the wounds of the stigmata. So we are called to be perfect to become perfect followers of Christ, so much so that we would bear his image. Maybe not literally, but to bear his image. When people see us, they say, that's a Christian. That's something that we're striving for, right? A little added commentary there. Pope St. Pius X proclaimed that the purpose of the Third Order of St. Francis consists in this, that its members put into everyday practice the precepts of the gospel perfection and serve as models of Christian life for the imitation of others. That is from Tertium Franciscarum Ordinum in September 8th, 1912. I will say that besides my normal pronunciation problems, there's some weirdness in the font and occasionally just blots of black, and it's making some of the words a little difficult to read. So, pardon. What is the spirit of the Franciscan order? Every religious order has its specific spirit. It is the founder who, with his particular ideals, outstanding virtues, and activities, gives his order its spirit. In St. Francis, we see seraphic love, extreme poverty, deep humility, great penance, and a chivalrous life according to the gospel. And how can one concisely express his spirit? Perhaps the best way is to say that his spirit consists in living out fully the whole gospel. Not only its commands, but also its precepts, ideals, and implications. As its first biographer, Thomas of Celano, wrote, he was the man with the evangelical vocation in truth and in faith, the servant of the gospel. His supreme desire, his ardent wish, and his highest principle was to observe the gospel in all things and above all things. Chapter 3, Third Order Handbook. While other founders concentrated on one or the other characteristics of Christ, such as zeal for souls or love of prayer, St. Francis concentrated on imitating Christ, the divine model as he is pictured in the gospel. Thus, St. Francis approached God through the sacred humanity of Christ. This is the gospel way, the way best adapted to human nature. I'm not going to keep quoting where it is in the handbook. If you want the references, please look at the document that is attached in the description below. From this we see the reason for Francis's great devotion to the babe in the manger, the man of sorrows upon the cross, as well as the body and blood of Jesus Christ in the most blessed sacrament. Pope Pius XI has stated that in no other saint have the image of Christ and the ideal of the gospel been more faithfully and strikingly expressed than in Francis, who has justly been styled the second Christ. That is from the encyclicals Auspicicato Sacra Propendium Rite Expiatus. Got it. To acquire the Franciscan spirit, tertiaries are called to frequently fix their attention on Jesus Christ and to endeavor to copy one trait after the other according to their station in life. Prayerful reading of the gospel and regular meditation will fill their minds with Jesus so as to enkindle love for him in their hearts and move their wills to imitate him. Observance of the letter and spirit of the rule will detach them from the world and self and awaken a longing and a taste for intimate communion with Jesus. The advantages of being in the Third Order. Following the spirit and letter of the rule, members of the Third Order of St. Francis find a safe refuge in a sinful world and an excellent nursery of the choicest virtues. By its wise restrictions and abundant graces, the Third Order provides security akin to that of the cloister. Thus, a tertiary vocation is a great grace approximating the call to religious life. The various apostolates of the Third Order gives the tertiary many opportunities to merit through the works of mercy. The tertiary has more help in the spiritual life than the rest of the faithful, besides the rule, so wisely constructed for those who seek holiness of life while living in this sinful world. He has also the glorious examples of the holy Franciscans to guide him, and he has claimed a special share in the good works of the three orders that will support his efforts. Furthermore, in those places where the Third Order is already established, he has the advantage of novice instruction and monthly conferences to unfold the beauty and value, the means and obstacles of the spiritual life, and to explain the application of the spirit of St. Francis to modern everyday life. And being in fraternal union with other tertiaries who hold the same lofty Franciscan ideals is a priceless assistance, providing joy and strength to persevere in this holy way of life. All tertiaries have the great privilege and duty of joining in the public prayer of the Church, the divine office. With the clergy and religious throughout the world, they become ambassadors to the Church to officially praise God to officially offer praise to God in the name of all humanity. Yet because the laity must live in the busy world, Holy Church, wise mother that she is, has given her tertiary children the choice of a much simpler office suited to their station in life, known as the office of the paters, or the seraphic office. See, that's possibly where that book comes in. This option makes it possible for persons of virtually any station in life to faithfully pray the daily office. There are also, throughout the year, 8 Franciscan feasts in which tertiaries can gain plenary indulgences. The fruit of the Third Order. The Third Order of St. Francis has done so much good over the centuries, both in the sanctification of souls and in the building up of Christian society, that many popes have been moved to sing its praises. The number of Franciscan tertiaries now listed as saints or blesseds is enormous. As to the effect in the social sphere, Pope Pius XI stated, "A most wholesome change in society began to take shape. The new order, founded by Francis, spreading far and wide among the peoples of Christendom and gaining in its members, while moral purity followed in the wake of the practice of penance. There was a beautiful, glorious revival of the choicest virtues in civil life. In fine, the face of the earth was renewed." From Rite Expiatus. Conditions for entry into the Third Order of St. Francis under the Friars Minor Capuchin of the traditional observance of Morgan, France. Candidates must be above the age of 14, in good character, peace-loving, and above all, tried fidelity in the practice of the Catholic faith and in loyalty to the Roman Church and the Apostolic See. They must be in accord with the doctrinal position of the Capuchin Fathers of Morgan, France, and the priestly society of St. Pius X. Married women may not be received without the husband's knowledge and consent, unless their confessor judges otherwise. One must not belong to another Third Order. Church law mandates that candidates undertake at least 1 year of novitiate before making their profession. The Capuchins of Morgan require 1.5 years. At profession, the candidates promise to observe the rule for the rest of their lives. Again, the current rule of 1978, the Pauline rule, if you will, does not allow people to join until, I believe, they're 8. Now, I'm going to get ahead of myself. Is it 18 they can make temporary ones? I'm not sure. They're definitely not 14-year-olds. And there's a longer time. Married women don't need permissions anymore. But we do agree, all in all, that you must not belong to another Third Order and that you must be have tried fidelity in the practice of the Catholic faith, loyalty to the Roman Church and the Apostolic. See, it's interesting that you no longer have to believe different positions that different friars hold. It's just this one group for these guys in particular, and I don't know that we talk about that at all in the Pauline rule. So just some interesting things you can compare and contrast there if you're trying to decide between orders. But again, this one, not only do you have to be in accord with doctrinal, now it doesn't say every whim of them, but the doctrinal position of the Capuchin Fathers of Morgan, France, and the priestly society of St. Pius X. So you need to think about it. For some people, this is going to be the correct choice. And even if you're in the OFS or under another rule, you could be under the Leonine rule, you could be under the original rule in some other Third Order. It's good to know more about our brothers and sisters in Francis and Clare. A synopsis of their Third Order rule are simplicity and modesty in dress, keeping away from dances and shows which savor of license, and avoiding all forms of dissipation, temperance in eating and drinking, fasting and abstinence on particular days, monthly confession and Holy Communion, praying daily one of the 3 offices approved by the Church, and I believe, but I could be wrong, that is the Liturgy of the Hours, the Little Office of the Blessed Virgin Mary, or the Office of the Paters. Could be wrong, but I think those are the 3 they allow you to choose from. You need to make a last will and testament, lead others by setting a good example, maintaining charity towards others, refraining from taking unnecessary oaths, and using indecent language. You need to attend Mass daily when possible and attend the monthly meetings. You need to contribute to a common fund for the needs of poor members and for the dignity of worship. That's, again, something that's very different. We still have the common fund, but currently our common fund seems mainly to animate the higher up levels of fraternity, at least in my fraternity. I don't know that the common fund is used for the needs of poor members, wish that would come back, and it would take some of the poor members to take the humility of asking for help when they need it, which is quite a blessing to your fraternity if you turn to them and ask. It's a blessing. We also needed to visit sick members and pray for deceased members. Vitally important. I think the praying for deceased members has also fallen away, and visiting sick members has gotten more difficult as fraternities has gotten spread thin. People may be driving hours to attend a meeting, so their brothers and sisters live very far away as well, although we do have use of things like different kinds of video calls and actual phone calls. So you could still probably pull that off if your fraternity is one that lets you know the addresses and phone numbers of your members. Just saying. Let me twitch there for a moment. You can see that there are issues that happen in every fraternity probably. Helpful information for those seeking to join the traditional Third Order of St. Francis. They are directed by the traditional Capuchin Franciscans of Morgan, France. They want you to know some things about tertiary life: postulancy, novitiate, and in parentheses, habit and novice meetings, profession, and rule. So in postulancy, it says ordinarily, where there are established fraternities of the Third Order, there is a postulancy period of at least 3 months for those seeking entrance. Postulants shall be briefly instructed in Christian doctrine, in the life of our Holy Father Francis, and in the Third Order. That is the Constitution, Article 12. Where there is no fraternity, as would be the case here, candidates enter as isolated tertiaries, and the postulancy period is waived. At the end of the postulancy, those who have been found suitable shall be admitted to the novitiate of the fraternity by the director on the advice of the council. So how do you apply for that? I don't know, and isolated tertiaries doesn't work right now under the rule of 1978 that many OFS are living. But in this rule, in the Leonine rule, it did allow for isolated tertiaries, probably like our brother, servant of God, John Bradburn, was an isolated tertiary. I think we've been searching for him in fraternities and looking for some form of fraternal life, but it did not always exist, and he lived in the middle of nowhere in, I believe it was Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, and did not have access. I don't even know that he knew that the rule changed right before his death. I believe it changed right around the time of his death. I don't know that he ever even knew about it. Very weird, but what would you do if you were an isolated tertiary in that circumstance? So I love that you could be an isolated tertiary under this rule, because it's just people's reality. They may need to move at different periods of their life for work, for their husband's work, for retirement. I know people who have moved away from their fraternity in their retirement to live near their children who have moved away, and there's no fraternity. What are you going to do? Risk all your health and everything to be in a fraternity and depend on them for all your needs, or be closer to your actual children, your biological family, and not have access to Franciscans? There seems to be a way, a third way, isolated tertiaries, to be connected even though you may be at some distance. That's something I've been looking for, so I feel very blessed that this does exist in this group at least. Now let's look at their novitiate. According to the rule in church law, the novitiate must last at least one full and uninterrupted year. Because of the current difficult circumstances, the Capuchins of Morgan have extended the length of the novitiate for all their Third Order novices to 18 months. I don't know what the current difficult circumstances are there, but to note that it's been extended to 18 months. The novitiate begins with a clothing ceremony in which the candidate receives the habit of the Third Order, which is a large brown scapular in a cord with 5, and it says in parentheses, or 3 knots, both worn under one's clothing. One chooses a new name on this day, which is really interesting. I have heard of the large brown scapular and the cord with 5 knots. I've only seen the cord with 3 knots. The last time I've seen a scapular were in old videos, and people were wearing what looked to me, what I used to wear in gym class, they called a pinny. So it's interesting that we used to have the large brown scapular and the cord with 5 or 3 knots both worn under one's clothing. Now we have this tau with 3 knots, which is worn usually above one's clothing. People in the OFS do not normally choose a name, but it may be chosen for you. It is no longer, it's still very iffy and very rarely happens. I actually did get a name when I professed. Oh, I got a title. So I got Of the Amazing Grace is my title. So you can add that after my name if you'd like. The purpose of the time of probation, remember that was 18 months, I believe they said. The purpose of the probation was twofold: to give the novices an opportunity to test their strength and perseverance, and to enable the fraternity to ascertain their fitness. So basically, discernment of the person, the individual, and discernment of the fraternity. So you're both discerning, is this for vocation for me? And those in the fraternity are discerning that as well. So what if you're an isolated tertiary? Not sure how that looks, but maybe the director is discerning you. Yeah. Besides the usual monthly meetings of society that they are required to attend, there are novitiate novice instruction meetings, usually held once a month. It is of utmost importance that the novices attend all of those meetings. The novice instructional meetings are intended to prepare the novices that they may afterwards dedicate themselves to God by profession with a full realization of their obligations, from the Constitution, Article 20. In these instructions, the novice will learn about the life and spirit of St. Francis, the nature, purpose, and history of the Third Order, and the regulations of the Holy Rule, and how to attain perfection while living in the tumult of the world. They will also learn the works of piety, charity, and of the apostolates of the tertiary life. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Towards the end of the novitiate, the director, if he thinks fit, shall test the knowledge and intentions of the novices and seek the advice of the council as to whether they are worthy of being admitted to profession. Constitution, Article 23. So a little different. Profession in the Third Order is a solemn religious act whereby one of the faithful, moved by divine grace, dedicates himself to God, promising to observe the holy gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ in the world by living according to the commandments of God and the rule of our Holy Father Francis. Those who profess are not bound by vows, but by a promise, which is not binding under the pain of sin, but profession is for life. There are some preliminary requirements from the rule, Chapter 1, Section 1. Only those may be received as members who have completed their 14th year, that's 14th year, and are of good character, peace-loving, and above all, tried fidelity in the practice of the Catholic faith, and in loyalty to the Roman Church and the Apostolic See. From Rule Chapter 1, Section 2, married women, I think we already said that, may not be received without the husband's knowledge and consent unless their confessor judges otherwise. And while they dropped that in the secular Franciscan rule of 1978, really any spouse should at least have the knowledge of their spouse and consent. I honestly asked my husband's permission because if he wasn't comfortable with it, this is a lifelong commitment I'm making, and I made a lifelong commitment to him. I need to check with him first. If you're not doing that, I find that very bizarre. The Constitution, Article 11 says, since the continual growth of the Third Order should be in holiness rather than in numbers, careful inquiry shall be made whether the candidate are fit for entry into the order according to the conditions laid down in the rule in these constitutions. Those are fit for membership who, called by divine grace, desire to dedicate themselves to God in a special way in the world, that is, wish to be pleasing to God and to be of service to the Church and to human society according to the spirit of St. Francis. Very important there, very important. So many times, and I want to see the numbers raise up again, but that's not really the most important. We need to see growth of the Third Order in holiness. Pray for that every day. Whatever Third Order, pray for all Franciscans that we grow in holiness. I always say holiness and vocations. Can't hurt to ask for it, but remember, the emphasis should be on the holiness. Always put the holiness first. The numbers come later. Further requirements. Required by the traditional Capuchins of Morgan, France, candidates must be in accord with the doctrinal position of the Capuchin Fathers of Morgan and the Priest's Society of St. Pius X in the present religious combat. That should make sense for this particular group. One must not already be a member of another Third Order. Only with special indult may one belong to two Third Orders. I can't imagine how you could pull that off. Constitution, Article 13. It'd be hard to balance the requirements of both. It's possible under the proper conditions to switch from one order to another. One must have dedicated to combat the spirit of the world, to respect the rules of Christian. Combat the spirit of the world. Amen on that one. To respect the rules of Christian modesty of dress, Pope Benedict XV called the Tertiary Sisters to be an object lesson of holy modesty to the other matrons and maidens, to master one's language, and as to avoid gossip and vain quarrels. So to master one's language doesn't mean to have a large vocabulary, but to make sure you're not using any profanity. You don't need to say things out of turn either. Avoid gossip and vain quarrels. Really think, is that necessary to say that? It totally may be, but to learn to discern that. One must be ready to follow the formation program for the postulancy and the novitiate and to participate in the regular monthly meetings of the fraternity, except in the case of a major impediment, which happens. Note, as noted above, ordinarily, where there are established fraternities of the third order, there's a 3-month postulancy period for those seeking entrance. Where there is no fraternity, as would be the case here, the postulancy period is waived. How to apply? Be sure, and this is in giant capital letters, be sure that you satisfy the preliminary conditions for becoming a Franciscan tertiary. Next, find a priest who is familiar with you, should be your director, confessor, pastor, or one who has been any of these in the past. Mainly, he's been your director, confessor, or pastor in the past, not that he's left the church. Let's be clear about that. You need to ask this priest to write a letter recommending you to the third order. This letter is to be addressed and sent to, and again, this is going to be attached in the description below, the Reverend Scott Setimo, St. Thomas More Priory, 500 Riverview Avenue, Sanford, Florida, 32771. It says, or the current director of the Franciscan Third Order. So if it's not that person, I don't know how you're going to get the correct address. You're going to have to do some research on your own. I apologize. Then you're going to give this priest a copy of the letter entitled To Become a Franciscan Tertiary, which is signed and sealed by the Capuchins of Morgan. This letter lists the required dispositions of a candidate to the third order, and thus it gives the priest a guide for determining whether or not the petitioner is fit. He will need to have this before he can write the letter of recommendation. Okay, that came out awkwardly. It shouldn't have given you the address yet. The address should have been at the end of that. So you're going to ask the priest to write this letter, and he's going to say, write a letter about what? And then you're going to hand him a document called To Become a Franciscan Tertiary, which lets him evaluate, is this person a good fit for it? And that's why you chose him. And he's going to discern that. He's known you for a while. Makes sense. And then he is going to write that letter, address it, and send it to him. I know even in secular Franciscans in the current rule, I never saw that letter that was mailed directly in. So that I believe is still practice. Investiture. After this, Father Setimo may pay a visit, if there are a good number, for the investiture ceremony in which the candidates receive the habit and are enrolled as novices. If Father Setimo does not come to conduct the ceremony himself, he will give faculties to your local priest to conduct the ceremonies. And again, it gives you the contact information that we've already given you. So I hope that's been a help to some of you. I know some of you have had questions about this, as well as, hey, just getting to know some of our brothers and sisters in Francis and Claire a little bit more. May God bless all the Franciscans and help them to give them all the graces they need to grow in holiness, as well as vocations to the order. God bless, friends.